How do we respond better and faster to change? I really believe it comes down to what I call thriving tribes. And a thriving tribe is where we have equal emphasis on performance and well-being, both those things. At the core of a thriving tribe is resilience, and this can be personal resilience, it can be our home tribe resilience, it can be our work tribe resilience, and it can be systems resilience. And many of the things already discussed about change and being able to bounce back quickly is very relevant to this meeting today. So resilience has had quite a high profile, but it's not cool in every circle. About 12 months ago, my wife Karen was having her 30th school reunion, and Karen came from Armidale, and so she was sort of looking forward to it, but Karen was a bit of a self-described geek girl. She wasn't part of the cool crowd. She had her own crowd, but it wasn't the cool crowd. So she was sort of driving up, and we were driving up together up to Armidale, and a bit of trepidation, looking forward to it, when suddenly a call came in, and it was one of the cool girls. And I said, "Oh, Karen, I really want to catch up with you. What are you doing? You coming to this party?" So Karen sort of hung up and was quite surprised. Then a text came in from another cool person, and then finally a Facebook message came in inviting her to something else, and she said, "Revenge of the Nerds." She was really quite taken back. She was surprised, but to be honest, I wasn't, because over the last 5 years, Karen's achieved a fair bit of notoriety. She's the research director of the Cancer Council, and she manages about 80 researchers. She's served on President Obama's cancer committee. She's been named in the 100 most influential women by the Fin Review. And next week, actually, she's actually going to be announcing through the research when cervical cancer is going to finish in Australia. And Australia's going to be one of the first countries in the world to finish it. And about 2 weeks after that, she's going to be announcing when it's going to finish around the world. So, she's certainly had influence beyond Armidale. So anyway, we get to Armidale, we go to the Wicklow Hotel, and she told me about who all the cool guys and girls were, and very noisy, people hadn't seen each other for a while. And then we sat down, and as it turned out, I knew that we were sitting next to a really cool guy, Posty. And Posty was a bit of a ladies' man at school, and Karen was quite excited. She was giving a nudge under the table, and I'm thinking, whatever, whatever. But what do you do in that situation? So I was feeling a bit like a fifth wheel, because they were all getting together, and there was, I think, only other 2 other partners there. So I said to Posty, "What are you doing, Posty? What do you do, Posty?" And he says, "I'm a creative director for Circus Oz." So pretty cool career. And so he says, "What do you do? And what do you do in that situation?" So I just said, "I'm a resilience specialist." And it was quite noisy and stuff, but he looks back really impressed. And he says, "You're a Brazilian specialist?" So I don't know about your high school, but at Duval High in Armidale, it's much cooler to be a Brazilian specialist than a resilience specialist. As we mentioned in the introduction, I went through a really bad crisis, and it was really triggered by the tech crash in 2000. A very short period of time, I lost my job, my 20-year marriage, became estranged from my kids, and had to go and live with my parents. And I don't know if there's any, it's a bit of an old comedy these days, Seinfeld, but I felt a bit like George Costanza on Seinfeld. But, to be honest, I wouldn't have made it without my parents. And it went for 5 years. I tried 23 different lots of medication. I had shock therapy. I had everything you could think of. I had hospitalizations. I had suicide attempts. And I wouldn't have made it without my parents. They really believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And, I remember one time standing in their kitchen at Foster on the North Coast, and I just came out of hospital saying, "Why me, why me, why me?" My mother sort of, really narrowed me in the eye, and she's only about 5'2", but she's got this stare a bit like Clint Eastwood at times. And she just really said, I really believe you use this experience to help other people. And I really didn't believe it at the time, but it sowed a seed, and it was an important seed. And my recovery was slow, involved, of course, good medical care, but lots of walking in nature, reconnecting with old friends, I was out of the workforce for 5 years, and so I started doing voluntary work, got into a bit of meditation, and then I decided to write these books because I really yearned for stories of people who've been through really tough times and bounced back. And the book you see there was my third book, and it was an international book. I interviewed people like Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's chief advisor, Patrick Kennedy, nephew of JFK. And these stories are powerful, but the other thing that I did was actually to ask over 4,000 people who'd been through really tough times, what was it that helped you bounce back? And I want to share some of those insights today. Through the launch of the book in March 2009, I met Gavin Larkin. And Gavin was tall, good-looking, very charismatic, CEO of an advertising agency. And but he shared something that had been a really troubling thing for his family. He'd lost his father Barry to suicide 15 years before. And even all this time later, he was having to explain to his son why his grandfather, who he never knew, wasn't around. And Gavin had this idea of, "Are you okay?" And the brilliant tagline was, "A conversation could change a life." And he was trying to sell me in the coffee shop in Crow's, and it's going to be big, it's going to all happen. We've got all these things planned. And I just said, stop. You had me at hello. You really had me at hello. Because I knew from my own personal experience how important the support of my parents was to me actually being here. I wouldn't have been here, quite frankly, if it wasn't for them. So that first year was unbelievably hard. We had no money, we had no employees, but we did have this driving vision that a conversation could change a life. And so we launched the first one in 2009. And, it's very, very telling, I think, that we had our most recent one just a couple of weeks ago, and it was number 10. And can I just ask in the audience who had a participation or celebrated, are you okay in your workplace? That's absolutely fabulous. I'd say, a good 80% of the audience, sensational. And it has progressed incredibly. It's taken on a life of its own. Like, I was actually involved in actually launching the first Are You OK at the CBA in 2009. And I think then we had about 5 people and a dog celebrating it. But we've really grown substantially. And this year, there's just been some amazing things happen. And, I was in the week of Are You OK, I did, 6 talks in 3 states. We had 2 big Are You OK events, media interviews. I was coming back from Canberra, and on the Virgin flight, came over the PA. We'd just like to remind everyone that tomorrow's Are You OK Day. And, we really support it and really encourage all our guests to. And some of you may know that Gavin tragically passed away from cancer in 2011, but I could just imagine punching him on the arm and saying, "How good is that, mate? How good is that?" And other extraordinary things happen, like just seeing, the representation in an organisation this size of people that got involved. But I think the gold standard goes to, anyone heard of a little town called Woolgoolga? Woolgoolga? Just north of Coffs Harbour, about 5,000 people. All those images up there come from Woolgoolga. An extraordinary woman up there called Lisa Nichols decided to have Whoopi Wears Yellow. And every shop had an Are You OK celebration, every doctor's surgery, the police station. They even had the whole town in yellow performing Are You OK on the beach. And just amazing to see how far it's come. And also the impact. We just have so many stories of where genuine, authentic conversations have made a profound difference. I think when I reflect, and I've been around business for a while, I think that the Are You OK team has been the highest performing team that I've ever been in. And just before, this Are You OK team, we've got 8 full-time employees. They went on a 14,000 kilometre journey around Australia, went to 6 states, put on 26 separate events, put out content that whole period of time. But it's interesting to reflect how far we've come. And I think just, seeing the number here that put up their hands, you can really think about it. We did research before this last campaign which showed that 81% have actually asked someone, are you okay, in the last year. And the great news is that 51% of us said it was asked at the right time when we were really going through something. But we've still got work to do, because we were also told that 57% of people went through a tough time but weren't asked, are you okay? And so we've still got some work to do. As I said, we've evolved and we started off digital. I think that was one of the real secrets, that we started off digital, so we've been able to grow our platform incredibly quickly in terms of reach and impact. But, when I really think about it, when I think about Are You OK and great performing tribes, tribes trump self. If you want to achieve great things, tribes trump self. If you want to overcome adversity, tribe trump self. If you want to outperform, outlast, and outmaneuver, tribes trump self. What about you? Have you ever been in an amazing team, an amazing tribe? It could have been your Year 9 netball team or your footy team. It could be a current role, or it could be a past one. It could have been working on the school fete. It could have been working for charity. But things just rocked. It wasn't easy, but somehow extraordinary things happened. Somehow, you just made things happen. So I'd just like to have a bit of a reflection on that now, and just think about when you were in that team, when you were in this amazing team that was so much better. Just have a quick 45-second chat with your neighbour, and just say, what did you think was different about that extraordinary group? Just take 45 seconds. So you've had a bit of discussion, and you've probably, a few things have come through, but I'd just like you to really reflect on that group, that amazing team you're in, and think about one or two words that would represent that team, which made it different to other teams you were in. So if you just, if someone would like to just call out a word, we've got a couple of mics floating around, but someone just put up their hand if they'd like to nominate one word. We've got one over here, thank you.
High energy.
High energy, fantastic. Who else would like to volunteer? Put your hand up and someone will find your way to you.
I'm just going to shout purpose.
Purpose, wonderful. Sense of purpose. Huge, and I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. Purpose is massive when you want to achieve great things. What else?
Genuine care.
Care?
No, genuine care.
Genuine care.
I know it's 2 words.
Ah. Genuine care. Excellent. What else?
The term trust, person next to you.
Trust. Yeah.
Passionate.
And maybe one more. Supportive culture. Excellent. So we've got things here like high energy, purpose, genuine care, trust, passionate, supportive culture. These are all the ways the things that come through. Sometimes we get complementary strengths as well. But trust, care, and often respect is always mentioned. It's amazing. It doesn't matter what environment it comes in, it always happens. So why is this so important? Well, we're all in pretty challenging times. You work within your organisation and you see change here, but every single organisation I speak to is going through dramatic change. I'm speaking at 9 o'clock tomorrow in the Gold Coast to an aged care group. So they're about to start the process that you've been through. So even in that area, there's change. Even charities that are going into the NDIS, massive change happening there as well. PwC have said that the greatest cause of lost productivity in the Australian workplace now is the absenteeism and presenteeism related to depression and anxiety. And it's not going to change. Just 2 months ago, the CSIRO came out talking about the top 6 megatrends that were going to be shaping workplaces for the next 20 years. And one of those 6 was rising work stress and mental health issues. So we can't keep changing it the way we already have. And I want to just really reflect on that element. I want you to think about this question. If we each strived as much as realistically possible to be a more caring and optimistic tribe, so we talked about, genuine care, think about the group you're already in, how much improvement would there be to our productivity? Now, we're going to have a live vote now. You'll see this come on your screen. So you SMS to that number, and for what you think, you put in A, B, C, D, or E. So SMS 0438 115 274 and put in A, B, C, D, or E. Isn't that extraordinary that everyone voted anonymously and said that if you could recreate this, there would be 50% increase in productivity as the average score. Even if you halve that, hopefully we can see how genuine care for each other, for our customers, can make a massive, massive difference to our productivity. Back to the slides, please. And this has been confirmed. This statement, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. It's a Gallup question that's been asked over 10 million times in 135 countries. They can show categorically that the more people that strongly agree with that in an organisation, the higher the profit, productivity, customer service levels, and employee longevity. But you know that intuitively. You already voted and confirmed that. So before we talk about tribes, we have to think about ourselves because, we have to take care of ourselves. There's no way we can contribute to a thriving tribe if we're not in great shape ourselves. So I want to introduce you to a remarkable tool, a tool that could potentially change your life. The moodometer. I don't see people jumping up and punching the air. They're just seeing their life's problems solved. But let me just explain where it came from. As I said, I had a very, very long period of depression. I went and saw my psychiatrist every week for about 5 years. And he always asked me to rate my mood from 0 to 10. And one day I asked him why I did that. And he said, well, for one thing, it helps me to understand where you are in terms of your perspective. But I also believe that you should be able to learn how to manage your mood and maybe even master it. I said, manage my mood? Haven't I got a clinical illness? I was a bit upset, really. And he said, you've had 5 episodes of clinical depression before, but I believe that you and everyone else should be able to learn how to manage their mood and maybe even master it. And again, it really sowed a seed, and I've been really passionate studying this area. And it turns out that he was largely right. There are 3 things that influence our mood. 1 is genetics. 2 is the events that happen in our life. And 3 is the actions we take each day. So out of those 3, genetics, events, actions, what do you think would be the biggest contributor? Professor Sonia Lyubomirsky looked into this. She wrote a book called The How of Happiness and looked at 400 peer-reviewed studies. And she showed the biggest influence is our genetics. It contributes 50%. Some people are just born more robust, more resilient than others. But the fantastic news, the next one, 40% is by our intentional actions. And that's what I want to really talk on today, our intentional actions, things that we can do and choose to do each time, because there are the events are outside our control on many, many occasions, but we can control what we choose to do each day. I think we all know that we are better people when we're in the green zone. We're more optimistic, we're more resourceful, we're more energetic. Again, all these things here, we're more compassionate. But there's a lot of evidence now surfacing that actually confirms that in business, there's huge practical benefits in having people in the green zone. The study you see up there was in Harvard Business Review, showed that people in the green zone are 31% more productive, they're 37% more influential, and they're 300% more creative. All absolutely essential things for navigating in rapidly changing times. So I don't reckon we should be trying to manage time. I reckon we should be trying to manage our mood. And I want to talk about some steps we can take that can help there. At the core of it is understanding our why code. And I call it a why code because it's our spirit. It's our, some call it, people call it soul or life force. It's what makes us unique. And really tapping into that, really living a genuine, authentic life is when we are most resilient. And it's made up of three things. Purpose. We've talked about purpose there as part of a great tribe, but it's also essential for a really resilient person, a really resilient team, a really resilient organisation. And I want to share how a quick way to really get a bit of an idea of knowing your purpose. The second thing is our strengths. Knowing what our top 5 strengths are out of a possible 34. These are our tools. When we use this, we're most effective. And finally, energy. It's the fuel in the tank. You know, making sure that we have the energy to be able to deliver on our purpose. So the first thing is purpose, having a sense of direction. The second thing is strengths. And finally, it's about, you know, really having energy in the tank. So the first thing is purpose, having a sense of direction. And there's really 3 ways that we can do this. And, you know, we don't have the time today to go into it, but I'll give you some examples and insights about how we go about it. It's good to reflect on your childhood, about what you're really passionate on. It's good to reflect on any big crises you've had in your life, because that helps you, that can really feed a passion and a purpose. But it's also good to reflect on a really, really proud career achievement. And so what I do in my workshops is that I have people think about a really proud career achievement they have. Of all the things you've done, what is the thing that you are just really proud of? Just yourself. Then ask yourself, what were you doing? Who are you helping? How did they benefit from that help? And why were you proud? Why did you choose that one? And in the workshops, I have people interview each other for 3 minutes. And while the interview is, it's not a conversation, it's an interview. And so one person interviews, one person probes, one person just probes to find out much about the other person. And then the person interviewing feeds it back to the other person, why they think they chose that. And I'll give you an example of how that works. You probe until you see the eyes light up. When people do this, it doesn't even matter if it's after lunch, you see the room lift, you see energy going everywhere. I interviewed once a guy, and he nominated his proudest career achievement was opening a group of sustainable energy shops and having a consultancy. And so I said, why do you nominate that as the most important thing? Who is it benefiting? And he said, oh, it's just the right thing to do. And I kept on probing, and then finally he said, because I love bushwalking and I want my grandson to be able to experience the same things. And you can see his eyes light up. You could see it touched something really deep in him. And that's what happens when you really probe to understand people's greatest achievement and why it was. So the next thing we do, as I said, this is a very fast track through it, is we get people to write the first draft of their purpose. And this is my purpose. I help leaders and teams be more caring and resilient so they can thrive on change. I did some work with some financial planners, which, as you know, have been through a pretty brutal time. And many of them, the majority of them, are really, horrified at what some rogue planners have done. And I took a group of planners through this exercise where they interviewed each other and tried to understand why they were doing this and why it was so important. And I remember a young financial planner, probably about 26, 27, came up and said, look, I now know what I do. I was embarrassed to say at a barbecue that I'm a financial planner, but I feel good saying this. And he said, I help people be worry-free about money so they can lead their ideal life. It has to be their language, it has to be their story, and it taps into their experience. We don't create our purpose, we uncover it. And we uncover it by really reflecting on the things that are really important to us. When I first met Karen, she was very much a scientist. She described herself as an epidemiologist. She described herself as a cancer researcher. But I helped her and her team think about this in the work they do. We help policymakers decide the most cost-effective way to prevent cancer through immunisation and early detection. Now, they have done it with cervical cancer, And they're now moving on to bowel cancer and prostate cancer. They've got a clear vision, a clear benefit of the work that they do. I also did work with operations people that worked in a financial services area, a continuous improvement. This is one that they came up with. I provide advice and assistance to continually improve our business. So that'll give you an idea of, why purpose is so important. And I've got, some brief videos that I'll forward through the group here. If you want to revisit that, you can see a bit more about how that happens. So we talked about purpose. Now I want to talk about strengths. Now, if I asked you what were your strengths, and I was a recruiter, I was a headhunter for a long time, most Australians really struggle with that. They can't articulate it, or they tend to say, they really can't be very articulate about it. But I've worked a lot with the Gallup Strengths Finder, where you find out your top 5 strengths out of a possible 35. Now, knowing this is so important now because our careers are changing so quickly. 100 years ago, there were 30 professions. Now, if you go to a career website like Career Builder, there's 13,000 it's building daily. And you would know in your organisation there are positions here that weren't even here 1 year ago, and we don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years. And so knowing our strengths is the key to navigating things when we're determining whether we should take this role or that role. My son Adam, when he was about 16, I said to him, "Mate, what do you think you're going to do? Approach the end of school, what do you think you're going to do?" And he said, "Oh, I think I'm going to go into advertising, Dad." I'd never mentioned that before. So I said, "Why? Why?" And he said, "I haven't really mentioned that." And anyway, as I said, I was a bit of a headhunter, a bit of a good prober of questions. And it turns out that he thought that advertising, through the view of Mad Men, that in that environment, everyone has a bar fridge, that you have lots of long lunches, and you sleep with lots of beautiful women. And I said, "Interesting theory, mate. Why don't we check it out?" And so I organised for Adam to have work experience with Gavin Larkin, the founder of Are You OK? And so I took Adam in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. He gets in the car. He said, "I don't think I'm going to go on advertising, Dad." I said, "Why? Why?" Oh, it's completely different to what I thought. But how do we know? How do we know? I got Adam to do the Strengths Finder, the Gallup Strengths Finder, and identified that he was a really good problem solver. He likes solving problems. He's very future-oriented, and he loves to learn. And his top subjects were maths and science. So I thought, well, okay, well, what about we go and check out science? So I took him along to, the science day at the University of New South Wales, took 2 of his mates as well. And, has anyone been to an orientation day for a university recently? It's like a seduction because they see these kids as, cash flow coming in. So they have, free food and beer, big upside for 18-year-old boys. They thought this is great. They, have stories about doing science in the pub. And the real, coup is having these good-looking second-year women students networking around and talking to the prospects. And so I'm not sure if it was for the right reasons, but all 3 joined science. But here's the thing. Adam loved it. Right from the start, he loved it. First year, he thought it was fantastic. Then he and his girlfriend, they'd saved up themselves. They went around the world. They travelled to 30 countries in that next year. They took their gap year after the first year of uni. They came back and you think, is he going to go back to university? Going to go back? The first thing he says when he gets off the plane is, "I can't wait to go back." That's what happens when we play to our strengths. And there is nothing better when you see a child or a spouse or yourself play to their strengths. And Gallup research shows, as I mentioned before, if you know and develop your top 5 strengths, you are 600% more likely to be engaged at work and 300% more likely to report high life satisfaction. And you can find out how to do it at that website, Gallup Strengths Centre. You have to put in, a credit card and pay about $20 US to do it. But it is extraordinary, I think, the benefits in knowing your strengths, building your strengths. It helps you to navigate, career options, helps you to think about how you can really solve problems. So we talked about purpose, which is our direction. We talked about strengths, which is our tools. Now I want to talk about energy, which is fuel in the tank. And of course, it's all the normal things here, like exercise. If we have a 30-minute brisk walk, our mood is better 2 hours later, 4 hours later, up to 12 hours later, according to Mayo Clinic research. If we have breaks and we have good sleep, it adds energy in the tank. These things are incredibly important. But I want to just reflect on a wonderful trip that I had a while back. So the energy can really come in the way of physical energy or vitality or emotional energy. But I went on anyone recognise which movie this comes from? City Slickers? It's a bit of an older movie, but a bit of a classic. Who's seen City Slickers? Quite a few, that's great. For those of you that haven't, it's about 4 burnt-out middle-aged men approaching their 40th birthday. They've lost their mojo, don't like their work, they don't like themselves, don't like their family. And so what they decide to do is to go on a cattle drove. And they go to Montana. And on this cattle drove, they're just hopeless. They've never camped before. They're hopeless around horses, around cattle, around everything. But on the cattle drove is this really crusty character, Curly, played by Jack Palance. And Curly is just, the master of his kingdom out here. A crisis happens, he sorts it out. He's out in the outdoors, he's really centred, brings the cattle home. And at one stage, one of the city slickers, played by Billy Crystal, a character called Mitch, gets separated with Curly. And he says to Curly, "What's your secret, Curly? What is it? My life's a mess. I hate me, my wife hates me, my boss hates me. Your life makes sense. What's your secret?" And he does this. He says, "What, your finger?" He says, "No, just one thing." "What is that one thing?" And Curly says, "Well, that's what you have to find out. But if you find it out and you take care of it, everything else will take care of itself." So, believe it or not, about 7 years ago, I was asked to go on a cattle drove with the leadership team of Medibank Private in outback Queensland. They're having droughts there, and this was to raise funds for mental health services in the regional areas. And my job was to do a few talks along the way, some radio interviews, and also to facilitate a discussion with George Savides, who was the CEO, and his executive team. And before I went, I rewatched this movie, and I'd always loved the music, but this is the scene that really struck me. And so as I was going along, and we were just, it was 4 days, sleeping in swags, no internet, no phones. It was an amazing experience. And I was reflecting on my thing. Well, what's my one thing? And since my recovery, I've made a priority of getting up every morning at around 5:30, meditating for half an hour, and then exercising, either walking in the national park, which I live beside at Gordon, or at going to the gym, doing something like that. So I thought for me, my one thing is probably that, because if I do that, starts the day well, rest of the day goes fantastically. And then I thought, well, if it's one thing, for me it's probably meditation, because that then leads to the next thing. So anyway, I really reflected on this, and at the end of the cattle drove, we were all sitting around in a circle, and I recounted this story and my reflections, and I asked them what they thought their one thing was. And their answers came surprisingly quickly. Someone said, my relationship with my wife. When that goes well, everything else goes well. Happy wife, happy life. Someone else said, I go for 2 2-hour bike rides each week. That's my one thing. Someone else said, when I have quality time with my 7-year-old daughter. Now, I've asked this in hundreds of venues around Australia and around the world. It never ceases to amaze me, the variety of answers. I've had a burly coal miner say, singing in the choir 3 times a week. I've had the CEO of an agricultural products company that says chainsaw carving is his one thing. You would have to be pretty present, wouldn't you? I've had someone from a bank in North Sydney, a woman, say getting into a tinny by herself and going 10 kilometres out to sea fishing, that was her one thing. I've had people say, I walk the dog in the morning. People say, I water the plants when I get home from work for half an hour, and that's my segue to relaxing at home. So what do you think your one thing is? What do you think if you do that, everything else takes care of itself? Have a quick chat with your colleague, again, just 45 seconds, about what you think your one thing is. What did you notice about the energy in the room? We're at the end of the day. What did you notice about the energy in the room? Like, looking at you, just see it rise. People are smiling. There's energy in the air. That's when you know you're talking or getting pretty close to talking about your one thing. Now, in my experience, they typically fall into, 3 categories, and one of them is around exercise. Who would say that exercise is their one thing? Yep, probably about a third of the audience. Who would say quality time with family and friends? Excellent. And who would say it's more in the hobby type area? Could be a hobby area. Yeah, quite a few in that category as well. So my next question is, who would say that they do their one thing enough? Just raise your hand if you say you do your one thing enough. Who would say they don't? Well, there's a wake-up call. Hey, I should know your one thing, not your number 10 thing. There's always time for our one thing. It's not enough to know it. We actually have to live our one thing. We have to incorporate rituals in our day. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that we do our one thing? There's a psychology professor called Peter Goldwitzer who comes from NYU, and he specialised in intention to action. Intention to action. And so he gave his undergrad students a really interesting task. They were approaching Christmas, and he gave them the assignment where they had to consider, just before they broke up about the 23rd, they had to look at what they did on the 24th. They had to write an essay on the 26th and deliver it by 5 p.m. on the 26th. So think about your own household during that time, pretty busy time. But he gave one group one extra instruction, and that led to a 300% greater execution rate. Any idea what that one extra instruction might be? They got to choose a topic? No, not quite that. The one extra instruction was when and where you're going to do it. So it's going to take you about half an hour to do. Where will you fit half hour over those 3 days? And where are you going to do it? You're going to do it on the lounge room table, on the porch, or in the library. And really think about it, increase the likelihood it happened by 300%. So for those of you who raise your hands about living your one thing and wanting to do more, before you go away, think about when and where you can make that a ritual in your day. Who has people in their life that sucks the energy out of them? Some people put 2 hands up. There's no shortage of that, is there? But what about the people that you feel better being with and you feel that your life is better through spending time with them and going away? Like I have an amazing mate, Ted. This is us on our bushwalk. We tend to do bushwalks together. We met 25 years ago at Johnson & Johnson. He then became managing director of Oral-B, and I recruited for him. And we go on our walks and we can discuss anything. These are people that make us feel better. Now, I'm going to be announcing some research next week that showed that more than 50% of Australians feel lonely. And so I'm going to really challenge you to think about the really important people in your life. Think about those people when you think about that question or that statement. Are you seeing them enough? Are you making it a priority? Because the research shows the longest well-being study ever done is something called the Harvard Grant Study, where they followed 250 sophomores from Harvard for 70 years or 75 years. They're now in their 90s. It started off with 250. There's now, I think, only about 15 left. But they have terabytes of information. They have all their interviews with them, their family, all these things. And they can say absolutely the most important thing, the one message that comes out of this terabytes is that those that have warm and supportive relationships live longer, are healthier, earn more money, and have a longer sex life. it's pretty compelling, making a priority for those people. I call these people our green zone tribe, because when we're with them, they help us. If we go through a hard time, they're our scaffolding, and we all need scaffolding. So what about a thriving tribe? We've talked about, how we as individuals can thrive, but what about us as a group, as a tribe? We've already talked about these things being really important. I want to sort of stress the important role that leaders play in this. If a leader supports a wellbeing program or walks the talk, there's a massive flow-on benefit to everyone in the group. A massive flow-on benefit. Creating these genuine care, supportive environments is just as relevant, in fact, even more relevant today than ever. Google have been unbelievably successful. They went on this quest in 2012 to find out the secret to their best teams. At first, they thought it was individual members. They looked at, IQ, EQ, diversity mix. But they hit no correlation. They looked at 180 teams and looked at 250 factors for each team. And suddenly they had a breakthrough, and it wasn't so much the individuals, it was basically, the really important, it was how they worked together. And so these were the 5 norms of their very best teams. Number 1 was psychological safety, and I'll come back to it in a moment. Number 2 is dependability, which means we can rely on each other. Number 3 was structure and clarity. Number 4 was meaning and impact. But psychological safety was by far the most important. And psychological safety is where there is strong interpersonal respect and trust, and people feel comfortable being themselves. They look out for each other. They encourage each other to share ideas and share what's going on. So we've talked now about 3 parts of our why code. We've talked about having a purpose. We've talked about finding out our strengths. We've talked about having the right energy. But it's only by living it and doing the things that we know are good for us that make the difference. So, as I said, I'll be sending follow-up videos which will give you a briefing on strengths, a briefing on purpose, a briefing on psychological safety. But what are you going to do differently? Because, as Einstein says, nothing changes until something moves. I hope you may think of one thing, whether it's reconnecting with old friends, doing your one thing more, finding out your strengths, writing the first draft of your purpose, and doing those things is a prequel to staying in the green zone. It's been great to join you today, and I really sincerely wish that each of you individually and collectively go for the green zone every day. Thank you.